Okay, biology B students, here we go. Lesson 4.3, is it? Lesson objectives, right? We're looking for the evidence of evolution, right? So how do we come up with this theory? What's the evidence that allows us to make some theoretical concepts here? So lesson objectives, what evidence is used to help explain evolution? And use evidence to explain how common ancestry has evolved over the time period since Darwin, right? So if you look at the picture, right, we have in the center the theory of evolution, and then all of those things around the outside that help us explain the theory of evolution, the evidence that allows us to come up with this theory. So during and since Darwin's time, people have been looking for and studying evidence in nature and that teaches them more about evolution. Some types of evidence, such as fossils and similarities between related living organisms, were used by Darwin to develop his theory of natural selection and are still used today. Others, such as DNA testing, were not available in Darwin's time, but are used by scientists today to learn more about evolution. One of the pieces of evidence that allows us to come up with the theory of evolution is the fossil evidence. And if you look at the picture on the right, this is a fossilized remain of a fish from a long period of time ago. And fossils can be derived from rock or from wood. All right, we have fossilized remains of insects in amber, much like Jurassic Park. Recent findings of frozen woolly mammoths 22,000 years ago. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at remains fossilized and actually the actual creature itself. How are fossils formed? Well, fossils are formed in sedimentary rock. If you remember, sedimentary rock comes from debris coming down on a surface over time and things getting buried. And in certain conditions, you wind up having these layers and the mass of them basically providing an imprint of the creature. So it's layered. The oldest layers, and thus fossils, are located in the deepest parts, unless there's some sort of geological upheaval. They're at the bottom. The older ones are at the bottom. Newer fossils are toward the surface. Fossils toward the bottom are different from those at the surface. There are similarities which suggest a common ancestor. What are some similar characteristics that have evolved from the bottom to the top? You look at the picture here, okay, starting the Precambrian period all the way up to the Quaternary, right? You can see the various kinds of creatures and how they've evolved. These are the fossil remains that are very old, not as old, and the youngest. Similarities amongst organisms. Many organisms have similar characteristics, but yet are different. The difference have helped them adapt to their environment. Horses, zebras, donkeys, all very similar, but different. Why does a zebra have stripes? Stripes in the grasslands. How have stripes allowed it to survive amongst the lions? So, similarities amongst organisms. All insects have heads, abdomens, and thoraxes, antennas, 6 legs, and wings. Each species is different, and while all insects have wings, some have small, useless wings because their environments did not force them to evolve useful wings, or because of their wings became harmful to survival, much like with wings on a penguin versus a hawk. We talked about this earlier, various structures that are similar. Call them homologous structures. Homology is a characteristic shared by two species or taxa, groups, that is similar because of common ancestry. In other words, the bones are very similar in the organisms to the right? The three made or several parts, the humerus, the forearm, ulna, radius, the wrist bones, and then your finger bones. Analogous structures of different species having similar or corresponding function, but not from the same evolutionary origin. So a fin on a fish, the wing slash fin of a bird, penguin, and then the dolphin, its flipper, right? They're all similar, but they're not evolved from the same, one's a fish, one's a bird, one's a mammal. They're not coming from the same evolutionary path. And then the shark, penguin, dolphin use their wings, flippers in similar fashion. Vestigial structures or organs, right? These are genetically determined structures or attributes that have apparently lost most or all of their function in a given species, but have retained their evolution through evolution. So, why is there a pelvic bone here in a whale? Same thing with like snakes, right? If they had legs at one point, then they would need that pelvic bone. The whale pelvic bone and human coccyx bone no longer have a current use, but are still maintained. An embryo in an unborn animal or human young in its earliest phases, embryos of many different kinds of animals, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, etc., look very similar and it is often difficult to tell them apart. Many traits of one type of animal appear in the embryo of the other type of animal. Some other evidence is DNA, all right? If we look at the DNA code that has the instructions for proteins, proteins are made up of amino acids in a specific order, like letters are used to make a word. The table on the right, the more similar the creature, the more DNA they share. So this is the molecular data and evolutionary relationships of vertebrates. The number of amino acids that differ from human hemoglobin polypeptide, right? Total chain length equals 146 amino acids. Right, so ours is pretty much the same as the monkey, only a couple changes, right? As we get different from us, become less like humans, and there are an increase in the number of differences in our amino acid chain for the hemoglobin polypeptide. The table on the right, a likelihood of finding similar DNA sequence between humans and other organisms, all right? The gene sequences that code for proteins, all right? Random DNA segments between the genes, right? So you can see that a chimp, which is, in terms of classification, only is different by a little bit, is very similar to us in the sequence that codes for the proteins. The amino acid sequence of insulin is highly conserved among vertebrates. Basically, it's the same. Virtually all primates and monkeys share the same sequence. Rat and mouse insulins only differ from primate insulin by a couple amino acids. You can take a look at that for more information. Otherwise, this is it.